the most frequently asked questions from both the advanced survey and from last week's episode in this quick fire round. So the first one goes to you, financial materiality. Clearly, the ISSB's focused. Any plans to address broader materiality?
Wow, you gave me the tough one to start. So, it's worth mentioning that going all the way back to the consultation that the IFRS Foundation trustees did in 2020 to assess whether or not the foundation could play a role in sustainability disclosure, there's a pretty clear remit to focus on meeting the information needs of investors. And a big part of the reason for that is that there are other standard setters who either have done or are currently doing really important work to meet the needs of other users with other objectives. We're working with those organizations, and we'll talk a little bit about that today, to ensure that preparers and users have a coherent and comprehensive system of corporate reporting. But I think it's really important to note that our focus on quote unquote financial materiality does not exclude impact. So impacts can create risks and opportunities for entities through a variety of different channels, whether that's regulatory or social or market forces. So the two things are not necessarily mutually exclusive.
All right, let me take the second one. This is a common question we get. How much of the ISSB standards do you expect to be sector specific versus universal? And the answer here is that this is not either or. This is not an either or argument. As you'll hear in this webinar, the ISSB's approach to climate risk, for example, takes both an industry-based approach and a cross-industry approach to themes and metrics. Next one for you, Rommie. Will the ISSB's standards be mandatory for all companies?
Well, the ISSB is a standard setter, so it's up to jurisdictions to determine whether or not the standards will be mandatory under their purview, whether that's through a government agency or a regulator or even a stock exchange, for example. As you probably covered last week, as you probably heard last week in the first episode of this webinar series, IOSCO, which represents regulators in more than 130 jurisdictions, has been very supportive of our work thus far and plans to review the standards when they're ready, with a view to endorsing them for adoption in those jurisdictions. And so, more to come on that, obviously. But I think it's also important to note that even where they are not mandatory, investors with global portfolios are likely to push for voluntary use to ensure that the global baseline of comparability exists across all of their holdings. So, and I'm sure Richard and others can speak to that at some point later.
Great. Will assurance be required for disclosure using the ISSB standards? Now, the answer here is very similar to the last question, that it will be up to each jurisdiction. So our responsibility as a standard setter is making sure the standards are the basis of suitable criteria for assurance. In other words, that ISSB disclosure is assurable. As part of our work with jurisdictions, we'll be supporting them in determining appropriate assurance requirements. So, for example, if they look to phase it in over time, starting with limited assurance, and in identifying what should be assured. Last question in our quickfire round: what accommodations are you making for small and medium-sized enterprises?
Yeah, great question. Well, so the short answer is a lot. We're really trying to be as pragmatic and proportionate as possible in thinking about this work. And so we really want to try to make sure that companies of any size or stage of development can apply the standards effectively, including smaller companies, those in particular industries that may not be as far along in emerging markets in particular, or anyone really that's less advanced in sustainability disclosure. And we'll talk later, I'll talk a little bit later about some of the ways in which we've tried to achieve that, whether it's through guidance or educational materials, or even working with jurisdictions to think through how they might scale and phase the requirements in their jurisdiction.
Okay, though that's the end of our quickfire round, and let's go now to a presentation from you, Rommie. With an overview of our climate standard, how it fits in with the sustainability landscape. And a reminder, Rommie Johnson is ISSB Technical Strategy Lead with the IFRS Foundation.